Norwegian brand Cormate actually feels like quite an exotic kind of boat builder. Its stated aim these days is to build the fastest and most beautiful day boats in the world, and here at the Southampton Boat Show it's backing that up with a new flagship in the form of this, the new Cormate Chase 35 Supermarine. As I say, one of the key elements of the package with any Cormate, and with this flagship in particular, is performance. So it's a relatively light, stiff boat. It only weighs about 3,000 kilos. It uses a stepped hull, and there's plenty of carbon fibre on board to keep that weight down. It's also got a relatively narrow beam that encompasses about 25% of the overall length. And that 4:1 ratio is exactly what they're going for proper sea manners. The ideal kind of balance, they say, between efficiency and speed in the flat and soft riding comfort in the rough. But of course the engines are also a key part of that, and this showboat comes with a pair of 6.2 litre V8 diesels knocking out 350 horsepower each, and with those in the engine bay you'd expect to see this boat hitting in excess of 55 knots and pushing on potentially towards 58, 59. But you can up the ante a great deal more than that, spec it with a pair of 565 horsepower petrol engines on the stern drives, in which case 80 to 82 knots should be well within reach. But you can also spec it with a pair of outboards. You can go for a pair of 300s, 400s or 500s, in which case they sit way aft on a modified section of the hull in order to preserve a little bit of usable swim platform to make your way from side to side. But either way, as I say, what we've got here is the most popular option, and they certainly nestle into that engine bay pretty snugly. There's not a lot of space to spare. Now let's step into the boat itself and take a look at the aft end here. There's not a great deal going on the starboard side, just a walkway symmetrical into that cockpit. But if I move across to the port side, we've got the ladder here just on that angle, which incidentally is not just an aesthetic thing, it's also because it avoids the prospect of pranging the quarter of your boat when you come alongside. We've got a handle here to pull yourself out, and we've also got a little transom shower just here at the leading edge of that port walkway as it makes its way into the cockpit. But let's pop that back away, step into the cockpit itself and take a look at the basic arrangement. Now the basic arrangement here uses a pair of facing benches, one aft and one forward, slightly larger one aft because it integrates with that sunbed over the swim platform. But if we lift this little hatch here, you'll see that we've got a table fitting built into this unit very neatly. And I have to say, while we're looking at that and the strut that fit into the space between the two, the finish here is really quite exquisite. Whether you're looking at this glittering kind of metallic silver finish on the fiberglass, or whether you're looking at these grab rails built into the bulwarks. In any case, as I say, this table fits into that space. It doesn't lower into the space and provide an infill for sunbathing, but to compensate for that, this backrest here lifts right over and down into that slot to extend your sunbed. So that is a very useful and quite unexpected feature. If we work our way round to the port side and open a couple of little hatches, you'll see that you've got evidence of the use of carbon fibre all over this boat, and very clever use of space. You see we've got lines and cables in there. There's another one, of course, on the starboard side. Additional little cutouts built into the bulwarks for extra gear on both sides. So storage is better than you might expect. And in spite of the fact that this boat uses a relatively narrow beam of 8 foot 8 inches, you still get proper elevated walkways, little side decks that wrap around that central console to make your way to the forepeak. Before we go there though, let's take a look at this wet bar, because on the leading edge of that aft facing settee we get a nice little leaning post here that folds down and gives you a proper forward facing seat for up to, well, certainly 2, potentially 3 people. And ahead of that, this wet bar makes fantastic use of the space. The lid comes in 2 parts there. We've got a little diesel stove on the starboard side and a very tidy little sink unit on the port side. Really excellent use of space, as I say, with not a lot of space to play with, and a lovely big fridge down below. It's a quite attractive mahogany lining here. The bulk of the timber on board this boat is actually natural teak, whether you're looking at the deck or these grab rails or the linings further forward. Most of it is teak, lovely pale natural teak, but the mahogany looks pretty cool too. And with that silver finish on the fiberglass, it doesn't feel entirely traditional. It actually seems to blend the classical and the modern to tremendous effect. Now let's make our way up onto the side deck here and make our way forward. As I do so, we've got the petrol filler there and the waste outlet. We've got a single 400 litre tank on this boat. Excellent grab rails around the screen rim there as we move forward. And that incidentally is a reverse screen, which is quite unusual. The idea there is that it increases the ease of access down into that cabin because it isn't raped and aft facing. And also, apparently, in terms of wind and splash deflection, it's much more effective when you're underway at speed. As we make our way round to the foredeck, more of these very elegant inset teak grab rails and a really decent anchor locker. Relatively deep, plenty of capacity in there, though this boat is actually fitted with a stern anchor too because it came directly from Oslo. But if I spin around, what we have here is a decent sunbed for two people with a little backrest here built into the leading edge of the console, plus an optional solar panel up on top there just to keep your batteries charged. And if I lift that up, you'll see we get access straight down into that bow cabin. We're going to take a look at that in a second. But of course this is a really useful feature just for airing out that cabin if you spent a long weekend in there. Get some extra light and some extra ventilation down below. Let's close that up and head back round the port side and drop down into the cockpit and head forward to the helm station before we check out the cabin itself, because this really is a very purposeful part of the boat. It's split into two parts with a central column that houses your racing throttles. We've got a leaning post on the starboard side with its own dedicated little angled foot pod there, and a guardrail here, plus easy access to the rails that line the top of the screen there, so it's a good secure position. And on the port side, where the skipper himself sits, an adjustable wheel, the same form of seat, a fold down unit with excellent lateral support. When you're sitting in there, you really do feel very, very secure and cosseted. And down below, this little switch here, which is to alter the resistance of the impact mitigation. Again, we've got an angled foot brace with a rubberized lining for good comfort and traction. More storage solutions on both sides and some charging points. And if I nestle myself in here and take a look at the dash itself, well, you can see it's quite a deep set helm. That reverse screen comes up relatively high, so it's very easy to believe that it does provide the protection they claim it does. Good side extensions too. And what we have here is a pair of 12-inch plotters beneath this brow just to ease back on the glare. That adjustable wheel, these racing throttles on the right hand side, are your thrusters for port and starboard with some quite unusual switch gear, but you'll see that elsewhere. Here we've got lateral balance. Now that is nothing to do with your tabs. It doesn't have any tabs fitted to this boat. That basically tweaks the angles of the legs aft so that if our port side is high, we simply go like that, and it's very intuitive. The boat will drop the port side and lift the starboard side. If the starboard side's high, simply go like that. Very easy indeed. The rest of the switch gear is equally kind of manual and old school, and it's no less attractive for that. Now what we'll do is make our way around to the starboard side, past the wet bar, back up a step and down into the cabin space, the forward cabin. And to be honest, on a boat that looks this good with a beam that's relatively narrow, you don't expect tremendous things when you head down below. So anything is a bonus, and this feels very positive.
Right, and the headroom is probably only about 5'4", so you do have to stoop a little, bend your knees. But we've got a little seat here. We've got some wraparound storage canvases, little troughs on both sides, which is a very neat way to do it. Again, does the job without adding any unnecessary weight. We've got some very low level, low profile panoramic windows, which are actually a lot more effective than you think, not least because they're paired with additional sort of letter slot windows higher up and look out onto those side decks. And here's that hatch out onto the foredeck, makes a tremendous difference to the light and to the ventilation. Now, when we look at the storage in here, you lift that up and you think, well, it's not particularly big. You look down there and think, well, there's a tiny little slot. And you look over to the changing seat on the port side and think, well, that's not very big either. You begin to become a little bit critical if you were going to use this for a weekend away. But then you lift up this central section, which we'll do now, and all of a sudden, everything is forgiven because the space in here is really unexpectedly large. And the fact it's divided off one section from the next makes it all the more usable.
Now if we put that lid down and take a look at the bed itself, well, it is a very decent size. You would sleep with your head aft, but I'd use some fairly substantial pillows because to me it looks like the natural trim of the boat sees the forward end slightly higher than the aft end, which is not necessarily that comfortable. Nonetheless, we do have some lovely stitched leather lining around those bulkheads, just to give you extra comfort at night. And if I spin around and dip down, you'll see that below that helm position we have a compact little bed, big enough for a couple of kids. Not big kids, I'm thinking maybe sort of 10 to 12 years old at the most, but it's a handy spot just to pop the kids if you want to go for a weekend cruise instead of just a bit of fun day boating. And we're not finished there either, because as you'll see on the port side we've got a door, this time in curved mahogany rather than teak, and if I open that up you get access to a proper wet room. Good toilet down there, nicely fitted out again, really modern, quite sleek. This sink is reminiscent of the one that we enjoyed so much in that wet bar up top. A little mirror, tiny little lights, little windows. They seem almost absurdly small, but in reality, in combination, they work really quite beautifully, and they really fit in with the modern sort of vibe that this boat has. It's a very pretty space, and again they work the space really hard, as you can see from the arc of travel of that door. Everything is really finely tuned to produce a high performance offshore boat, but at the same time to give you an extra dose of luxury that you might not necessarily expect. This new Chase 35 Supermarine then is pretty much exactly what I want to see from Cormate as their flagship. It's clearly a very, very rapid boat, a high performance boat designed to look after you in rough seas and to take you across a lumpy sea state at outrageous paces in decent comfort, but at the same time it uses the space available to it to give you a sense of luxury, a sense of the high end. So you could easily see it doing good service as a super yacht tender, do equally good service as a standalone boat, but either way, to get the full import of what this boat is all about is to get it out on the water, see exactly how she performs. So we're going to get that sorted in the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, if you've got an opinion on the new Cormate flagship, please do leave a comment below. If you like what you see, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please do subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.